provide a platform for interesting women with interesting topics. And I'm really happy to have as a guest today Corinna Wetter. So my name is Julia. I'm a Tableau ambassador, and I work with Heidi Kalbe.
Yeah, hi all, I'm also a Tableau ambassador, but Data Plus Women is not just about Tableau, as you will see. It's about all things data and about all things women. And that leads us to Corinna.
So Corinna and we met a few weeks ago at a female networking event where we were both panelists. And I was really curious and excited about her workplace and the work that she does. And so today I wanted to invite her and ask her like loads of questions. So first of all, Corinna, won't you introduce yourself shortly so we can get started?
Thanks so much for having me. So I'm Corinna Wetter. I work for Superlab. We're based in Berlin. Superlab is a laboratory for feminist digital futures. And yeah, I mainly work on feminist tech futures and how to get there.
I think that's so exciting. So one phrase in particular has I came across. It's intersectional feminist policies. So could you explain to somebody that like knows nothing about this topic what this actually is?
Of course. I think it makes it a bit easier to understand if I'm just going to start with an easy example with myself, right? So I think as we hear with data, women, obviously, I am a woman, but there's more parts of my identity than that, right? So I'm also white. I have a German passport. I have no visible disabilities. I went to university. I could go on. There's so many points on that, right? So many markers that make up my identity and the privileges or discrimination I might face. And that's what intersectional feminism is about, because I feel like from older understanding of feminism, from like German feminism, for example, from the early 20th century, is mainly for, high upper class women to be able to go to university. And as important as it was, that didn't really help women that didn't even have that opportunity. They had to work in factories that were severely underpaid, right? So the whole idea is to bring feminism up to like the real life experiences that many women make. So it's not just about our experiences we make in the world as women. It's also other factors. What is what class do we belong to? Do we have disabilities? Is there anything else going on? Do we maybe have a foreign passport, which will keep us from certain opportunities? So all of these things stuck together make up our real experience in the world. And intersectional feminism really is about that, to really be closer to our lived experiences and see how does this privilege us in some areas, but maybe discriminate against us in different ones.
Thanks. That's so interesting. So basically, it's about not only looking at us as females, but also counting in other factors of our life. Like, for example, a Black woman will have other experiences than a disabled woman, than a white woman.
100% exactly that, yeah.
So I would be super curious to, yes, what is it that Superlab does? So me and Heidi, we work in consulting, so we're rooted in the business side of tech, and we're like women in tech. But you are working on this topic more from the policy side. So can you help us understand what Superlab does and how do we actually profit off of the work
Totally.
that you do?
Yeah. So indeed, we work more on the policy side. So this means for us a bit more how is tech policy understood, right? So from a German context, tech is often understood really from economical point of view, right? So like how can we get more startups to Germany? How can startups be more profitable, survive the first 5 years? These kind of questions. Or also infrastructure questions like how can we actually have a phone connection in the countryside? I don't know about you, but when I'm at my parents' home in like my village in southern Germany, I don't have any phone reception. So that's an issue, right? But that's often what is the understanding of tech policy in Germany, and I would say also most of Europe. But from our perspective, it's really like tech really impacts our lives in so many more layers, like really affects how we live together, how we communicate, how how we can do business, but also how we can actually get jobs. There's so many things. So tech impacts everything in society. So that's why we would say, instead of just looking at tech from an economical point of view, we understand tech policy as social policy. And this is a bit the narrative shift that we want to bring about in politics. And of course, that's a bit very big thing to do. So of course, as we're only an organization of 8 people, we do that in many different ways. Maybe I'll just get in there how we actually try to achieve that. So we work a lot with our community, communities of people that are really interested in these questions, activists, but also poets or painters. Like, we have so many different people that work on these questions of how can we, how does tech interact with us in our social lives? And these people we support with 2 fellowship programs that we have. One of them was called Muslim Futures. So that's about people in the German-speaking world that position themselves as Muslims, how they understand their world, like their world in the future from a technical point of view. And the second one is called Risk Takers. So it's about people taking risks and imagining different digital futures for us. And their work and their thinking and their results is what I translate into the policy sphere to make it more concrete. One of our fellows is a chronically ill and disabled person who's also queer, who has a lot of course, so for him, it's really important to have an influence on policy when it concerns health, because it's really impacting him a lot. But because he's chronically ill, he's Italian, he can't just go to Rome and do lobbying work, because he has to stay put. He needs, because of his physical needs. So he's developing a way for chronically ill people to take part in politics. He's looking at new ways of participation through digital means, online platforms, new ways of meeting with policymakers to make sure that his and other people's voices are heard. And these are the examples that I take from this work with our community into politics, and to explain politicians, but also people in administration, also hopefully people in the industry, that we can really use technical means to include more people to actually positively change our lives.
Cool. And just to understand a bit of so I understand like how you get your community, how you get involved with people, but like, where do you go from there? So you have all these fantastic ideas, you develop concepts, etc. And then what do? Do you just like phone up politicians and say, hey, can you vote on this? Like, super easily asked.
Actually, not that far from reality. To be honest, my typical day consists of lots of having coffee with policymakers. So
at the end of the day, you go like this, shaking because of too much caffeine.
Yes, actually, I need to start drinking tea because it's been too much caffeine, to be very honest with you. Also, lots of lunch breaks, so I also have to like look out for that, because I've been eating a lot of good Vietnamese food here in Berlin. But and yeah, what we do is like a variety of things. That's why also this job is so interesting, because no day is the same. So sometimes it's really looking at certain policies that do have a big impact from a feminist perspective. For example, right now there's a new law on health data. And as I just explained to you, health is such an important topic, and there's so many different point of views we have to take in. That's why then I actually phone up politicians in their offices in the Bundestag, in the German parliament, but also in the federal ministries. And I'm like, hey, we have a policy paper on that. We have some positions. Do you want to talk to me about that? And surprisingly, 90% of the cases, people are like, yeah, sure, sounds super interesting. Let's have a coffee. So I was also surprised when I started working here. I lived in Brussels before I moved to Berlin, and it surprised me easy when people like think you have something interesting to say. They really want to listen to you. So that's a really nice thing. But we don't do the very typical lobbying work of we write laws or amendments and we tell politicians, please introduce it into your law. That's not what we do. We're really more about what I said in the beginning, changing narratives, and really going away from like, okay, maybe this law is really good for the economy, but also look at the societal impact. And we need to find a good balance that both, like that the economy and people are both impacted positively. Like, where do we go? So this is a bit more the work we do. So less specific laws and more always going, hey, what's the societal impact? What about power imbalances? Who's impacted? How can we actually make this better? So this is a bit the work I do. And yeah, having a bit too much caffeine in my bloodstream is also a part of my daily work.
I just imagine you having lunch from 11 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. So like one lunch after another.
Luckily, I'm getting better at planning. So that hasn't happened to me in a long time.
Yes. So I'm also really curious about your understanding of feminism. So when I was in art school, I had this whole seminar about feminism, and we had first wave feminism, second wave feminism, and third wave feminism, where we are right now. And what I learned there, and I can honestly say that I do to sign up on it, and I do believe in it, is that feminism is not only for women, it's for men and women, but it's also for all people suffering from discrimination, and that feminism just strings together that we should, yes, advocate for more rights and more freedom, and for less discrimination. And whether it is a father that is getting discriminated because his employer won't give him paternity leave, or is telling him, if you go on paternity leave, I won't ever promote you, as well as, you know, fighting for the topics that we women have been vocal for a long time about. So yes, what are your thoughts on this?
First of all, completely agree with you. There's a really good book that's actually called Feminism is for Everybody. And I think it's by Bell Hooks. And I really agree with that. Because, I mean, obviously, a big focus of feminism is women, right? Because we're more than half of the population of the whole world. So, of course, that's a bit of the most obvious marker of discrimination. Because so many women, most societies are discriminated against in some way. But for us, it goes much further because it's really about discriminations of all types. So for us, feminism is more an understanding of power and power imbalances and how to actually have a more just distribution of power. So obviously, it's not just if there's, you know, white men leading in the world, but also wouldn't be just if it's just white women. So it's really more about where does the power lie, why, and how can we change it around. And maybe to make it a bit more easy to understand. Honestly, in tech, it's kind of obvious. Not that I want to villainize like all big tech companies, but it's kind of, there are big companies that kind of rule the whole market, right? We have Meta, Google, or whatever, Amazon, that do have such a large impact on the whole world and how we use technologies, how we can interact with them, how we can consume them. And for us, obviously, it would be better if there's more people in those companies that maybe look a bit more like the rest of the people in the world that also make these decisions. So this is, for example, a big power imbalance. We have those big companies, and maybe have also the European Union trying to regulate them. But how can we bring this in a balance together? So this is a bit how we understand feminism, how policy in this, in a sense, tech policy really impacts the whole of society, how it might actually further discriminations, but actually how can we turn this around and how can we use tech to make the world less discriminatory against everyone. So yeah, feminism is for everybody, and we want to be part of a little bit of a change in the world to make it better, so everyone can actually reap the benefits of digitalization.
Yeah, I love that. So you talked a lot about shifting the narrative, about like also engaging a mind shift. So I guess it's quite difficult to like measure success in that with traditional KPIs. But can you tell us like what is something that makes you go home happy at the end of a day? What is something that really makes you feel accomplished?
Such a good question, because I used to work for consultancy before, so having double, KPIs and then moving into this less measurable world was a bit hard for me in the beginning. But one big success we definitely have is the German federal government strategy for digitalization. And what we managed to put in there is a feminist perspective on tech policy. So they actually did write this. We need to take a feminist perspective, and we need to look at the impact of digitalization on the whole of society. And that was before my time, so it's not my success, but my organization's success. But this is the big thing, because that means it's a strategy, right? It's not law. But what we really notice is these kind of like how things are written really help in the future, because from now on we can always go back to this is what the government said, this is what we want to realize, and it really helps us also advocate more and more, because now when we meet policymakers we can say, well, it's the government's strategy, so listen to us. So this is what we really notice, is like it's so hard to measure, but those narratives really work. Another thing that what really helped us is, or what was a big success for us, is beginning of the year there was the annual UN Women Conference in New York, and our minister in Germany, Lisa Paus, for Family Affairs, Women and Senior Citizens, she went, and she was not, I mean, she's great, right? But she was not really interested in digitalization before, because she has so many other things to take care of. And my boss was also at UN Women, and like other people working in our field. And the minister came home from that 4-day trip to New York, and went back to the ministry and was like, we need to talk about feminist tech policy. This is like one of our top things to do in this legislative period. And now the ministry is really behind that, and we keep on having meetings with different people there. And of course, it's not just us, it's like more organizations, civil society, but we are part of that. And it's really nice to see that, one really well-structured good event can really also sway the mind of a minister. So just two little things, but yeah, sometimes we would love to be like, yeah, I reached 97% of my KPIs, but it's not this is not the industry for that.
Well, I think I will be more sensitive to that topic, and maybe even discover that, this has an influence. I think it's really important, the work that you do, because it's not only, so for Heidi and me, I think it's a lot about representation. We are what we are, and we're vocal about it, and we're visible because we would like other young women to see us and feel like they have a place in tech. And when they come into our team or our company, they're not by themselves, and they're part of, they can just feel normal and not like, oh, I'm the only woman in the room. I think that feeling is oftentimes something that we encounter in our work, that we go like, so when I enter a meeting, I immediately go like, okay, am I the only one? And it just gives you a feeling of, I don't know, I just feel more at ease, because I know that when there's more than one or two women present, I have much less to expect in terms of like these comments like, I cannot say that because there are women present, or things like, well, when I say that you look very nice in your blouse today, will you cancel me? And if there's just more women present, it tends to happen less. So it's just it's just creating a safer space. And I see that that your work may be less visible and you can less pinpoint to it, but I feel like that you're creating acceptance and a safer space on an entirely different level. So what I would be curious about is, how did you get into this topic, and are there any more jobs for people like you? Like, I would imagine 5 years ago, I would have been like, yeah, I want to do your job. That's my dream. So yeah, what would you tell young people who would like to emulate you?
First of all, I just want to say representation is so important, right? So maybe something I haven't explained yet. So we call it superrr with 3R, and it's a bit cheesy, but it's for the 3Rs of feminist policy. So that's right, resources, and representation. So you're doing the one of the 3Rs already. You're representing women in tech, which is really, really needed, but need to go further, right? So you need the resources and the rights, and I work on the rights. So I think it's really important to look at this from all different sides. So I'm happy we're together in that fight. And maybe just for my personal background, because I think it's kind of funny, because I'm not a techie at all, my background. is maybe, funnily enough, in East European studies. So my bachelor's degree is actually East European studies, and then I did a degree in gender studies and social policy. So I came in, I really came in from the side. I worked in Brussels for the European Commission on different projects concerning gender equality, but then also kind of because I started working for consultancy, I kind of switched into a bit more tech topics, like tech regulation for the European Commission. And this is really how I ended up at Superlab, because I really wanted to combine my interest for making the world a bit a bit better, a bit more equal for everyone, but also looking at one of the topics that are so important. So climate change obviously is important, but digitalization is also changing how we live together. And this is what really caught me, because has such a big impact on society. So I also think we need a feminist perspective on that. But if I want to, like, as a recommendation, what to do, really do what you want to do and really what you're passionate about. Because I mean, with East European studies, I didn't think I would work in tech, to be very honest. But following my passion, my interests really helped me get here, because this is also what people got from me. And I'm really passionate. I'm really passionate about about making Europe a more equal and better union. So this is why Eastern Europe interests me, because there's also so much still to do, so much to catch up on. And that also opened me up, these experiences also in Eastern Europe opened me up to more questions of social justice. And this is what made me interested in gender studies. So this might seem really random, but following my first passion really stacked up on now ending up in this job that I absolutely love. So follow your passions, and also think of what you want to achieve. So if what you want to achieve is a stable job and be able to care for your family, that's also great, right? No shame in that. But for me, I always notice I can't work in something that I'm not 150% passionate about, that won't make the world a better place, because this is what keeps me going every day and what makes me wake up happy. So yeah.
And are there many more jobs like yours out there? Or is this really like a very singular occupation?
I think I'm the only like policy officer for feminist tech policy per se, but I think that's just a title. I think a lot of people kind of do similar work as I do. But I mean, there's lots of jobs like mine, like similar jobs in like the NGO world. So if you want to do lobbying work, but for society, so we call it advocacy, right? I would say there's quite a good amount of jobs right now like that. It's just that right now there's lots of budget cuts from the federal ministries in Germany, but also from foundations. So the world, like my job market is getting a bit smaller, to be very honest, but I'm definitely not the only one, and I couldn't do this work by myself. So all the successes I've told you about, that's not just our work, but obviously the other organizations that work on these topics as well, like Algorithm Watch, or the European Women's Lobby, or the European Digital Rights Organization. So there's lots like that, but I would say I'm definitely a bit of a unicorn, because I'm definitely the only one doing this specific job.
Yeah, I imagine that you could work in a like tech lobby or NGO and do like women's rights, or you could work for a women's organization and do like tech rights, or for a women tech organization doing lobby work. I just kind of thought of that. Yeah.
Yes.
So
And I think you can bring in feminist perspectives in every job, right?
for sure.
So what you're saying, like representing women working together to make sure that everyone feels comfortable, that's feminist work, and that's also feminist tech advocacy.
Yes.
So
But also encouraging like my male colleagues to really take that time, take that parental leave, or go seek help for your mental health. And you're allowed to be, even though you're a man, you're allowed to have emotions and experience hardship. And I think we have, like, we are so open, like women are so open connecting and talking about their issues, while men really struggle, but rarely talk about it. And I think the next big liberation I see for women is when men start to talk about stuff.
I'm so with you. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to jump on that actually. So we've talked about how feminism is not just about women, but about all kinds of groups that have experienced discrimination. But I find that to really get the discussion going, we need all hands on deck. So everybody needs a seat at the table, which includes privileged groups. Corinna, do you find that it's easier to talk about these topics with people who it resonates with? So people who have encounter discrimination, and how do you approach people who maybe have not and are part of the more privileged groups?
Well, it's definitely easier to talk about these things with people that have experienced hardship. Sorry to say that much like that straight up, but it really is, because I feel like I can connect with every woman. I can connect on incidents of sexism, because unfortunately none of us have gone through life without any sexist experiences, or other groups like people with disabilities. They do make a lot of experiences every day, so for them it's really easy to connect when I tell them stories about how algorithms can discriminate. They're like, oh yeah, I've experienced it actually before. That's unfortunately not as easy with people that are most privileged in our societies. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but for them it's really, really harder to understand, because they just haven't experienced it. And for them, the best case scenario is if I tell them stories and they're really enraged because they can't believe it. And then often I look to other people in the room and they're like, yeah, obviously, I mean, this is terrible, but what did you expect? And this is a bit the experience I make. So the best case scenario is I enrage people that are very privileged in society, but for them it's hard to really feel it and really think about it and are aware of it. And I think that's why we need representation so much, because even the most well-intentioned, I take myself as an example, white person, I will never understand what it is to be a person of color in this country. And sometimes I will just not see, or I will just not completely understand the impact of certain policies on that. So that's why we need so many voices, and that's why we need like a more diverse representation. Because even if you want to do your best and be aware of these issues, you might just not see it. And yeah, and that's the best case scenario. Of course, I've also talked to people that are like, we don't need more annoying feminists in policy. Like, what are you talking about? So it's not like everyone wants to talk to me all the time, right?
So our final question comes from Gabriela, and she asks if you, the people that you address or lobby to, are they open-minded, or have you met walls, and probably how do you cope with people who don't want to listen?
The first question: the current government in Germany is really open to feminist perspectives. They might not call it feminist, they might call it socially just, something like that, but they're really open to it. So I'm having really good experience. The same on the EU level. But I think the more interesting question maybe is how I deal with people that don't want to listen to me. Very used to that. I grew up in a very, very like religious community, and I was always like the odd woman out, being really feminist and easily enraged by sexism. And that actually kind of fuels me, because I'm totally okay having these conversations, and I don't need everyone to agree with me. Of course, it's frustrating if these are the people in power, right? But I do feel like having one of these conversations with a person who really is completely opposed to my opinion sometimes is a bit more impactful than talk to people that already agree with me, because at least I made those people think. And sometimes, especially with parties on the democratic spectrum, right? They will maybe has a very small shift in their perspective, or at least they know there's a different perspective on these things. So for me, it's actually quite enriching. But yeah, if those parties were in power and I would have to fight against them, that would be a bit more frustrating, of course.
Well, thank you so much, Corinna. Our time is up, and thanks to our listeners for joining us. I hope you have a good day, and come back for our interview with Fidan Keshkin, who is a completely career changer into tech. Hope to see you again, and thanks, Corinna, for joining us. It was super interesting.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye.
Bye.